ability to bring human rights issues directly to the table of the UN Security Council in this area. And in this environment, the EU has remained strongly engaged, so we were instrumental in ensuring the passage at the end of last year of the General Assembly resolution, which extends the mandate of the UN SRSG, and indeed in December last year we also co-sponsored the resolution at the General Assembly on the return of forcibly transferred and deported Ukrainian children. We're now in the midst of preparations for the 61st session of the Human Rights Council, which opened today, and indeed there is a resolution run by the EU together with the Latin American and Caribbean countries, which is on the rights of the child with a specific focus on children and armed conflict. And in preparing that resolution, we, through our delegation in Geneva, consulted 23 children affected by armed conflict, and their message was very, very clear. Stop killing children, safeguard access to education, ensure humanitarian access, and involve children meaningfully in policy making for their futures. As was mentioned, we're also using public diplomacy, so the joint EU-AU-UN statement, which was mentioned on Red Hand Day on the 12th of February, and looking ahead, at the end of this year, December, will come the 30th anniversary of the Children in Armed Conflict mandate of the UN, which will give us further opportunities. So just to say that the revised EU guidelines that I mentioned, they structure our action on the ground every year in consultation with the UN and civil society. The Council updates the EU's priority list of countries where the plight of children is most acute, and that's to ensure that our action and programming follows the places where the risks are the highest and where we can make the greatest tangible difference. So those guidelines give concrete tools for action, whether it's strengthening partnerships with regional and multilateral, whether it's using our political dialogues to press for an end to grave violations, promoting the Safe Schools Declaration, or indeed ensuring child participation in decision-making processes. We will have further opportunities this year, including working with the Commission on the communication on humanitarian assistance, which will have a strong international humanitarian law dimension as well. So it's very clear to us that children must never be targets of war and that our work in this area must continue.
This is a message from the interpreters. Would somebody else?
Merci, Monsieur Matthews. Monsieur Shahzamani.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Mr. Shahzamani, you have 5 minutes.
Very much. War Child welcomes the important discussion on the recruitment and use of children in armed conflict. Sadly, as mentioned already, despite years of efforts by civil society and the UN, eliminate this practice in the number of children being recruited and used by armed forces and armed groups. War Child has supported conflict-affected children for nearly 3 decades. We have developed a specific care system that integrates responses to children's protection, education, and mental health and psychosocial needs. For many years, we have implemented programs to prevent recruitment and use, as well as supporting the reintegration and rehabilitation of children leaving armed forces and armed groups. As an example, in South Sudan, we trained military personnel on the prevention of children being used in armed groups, supported the development and implementation of national plans, provided livelihood assistance to demobilized children and their caregivers, facilitated psychosocial support for demobilized children, and delivered protection and psychosocial support training to social workers from NGOs and government institutions. And we have done this in many other countries where we implement programs. Currently, our work on this is integrated into our broader child protection, prevention, response, and case management activities. If the case of a child leaving an armed group by a community or other partners, we facilitate psychosocial support, cash assistance, and in-kind support, such as education, materials, and clothing. course, we know that the reintegrating children who have been recruited and used in a long-term process is a long-term process that requires engagement with both the affected child and the receiving community. Many children face stigmatization, which makes their reintegration particularly challenging. They also require psychosocial education and livelihood. War Child has developed programs to reduce stigmatization address mental health issues. The EU has a strong track record of supporting reintegration programs and prevention programs and has a critical role to play. Firstly,
10 years ago, it all began with one trade. Discipline became my edge. And today, I trade with confidence and consistency. 10 years of helping traders grow. FTMO.
In community stabilization and peace building. In this context, I urge that during the ongoing negotiations of the next EU multinational financial framework, children's rights are prioritized through the inclusion of a special child's marker and by ensuring that sufficient funding is allocated to humanitarian, peace building, and development programs, especially in a time where these fundings are under extreme pressure outside the EU specifically. Second, we are alarmed with the erosion of international human rights and international humanitarian law. We call EU to firmly stand up in defense of international law and take concrete measures against those who violate laws and commit grave violations against children. Real accountability incentivizes behavioral change and encourages perpetrators to end grave violations. Furthermore, we congratulate EU for their recently updated CAC policy framework and we call for its full implementation. The Paris Principles also remain an important and useful tool in this regard. States must implement the Paris Principles and guidelines on children associated with armed forces or armed groups, which encourages states to prevent recruitment, facilitate the immediate release of children, and support their reintegration. Finally, we are concerned that the context of counterterrorism laws and operations, children who have been recruited and used are sometimes treated as perpetrators rather than as victims. We urge all states to recognize such children primarily as victims and to refer them to child protection actors or, where necessary, handle their cases through an appropriate juvenile justice system. While the situation for children recruited and used in conflict is bleak, progress is possible. Since the establishment of Children and Armed Conflict Agenda in the mid-1990s, more than 200,000 children have been released from armed groups and armed forces through the work of the United Nations and civil society partners. And the EU has had an important role in that. With the right support, each child has an opportunity to rejoin society and recover their childhood. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Moving on now to questions from members. Ms. Timilo, first of all, from the Socialists.
Obrigada a todos os nossos convidados. Hoje assinalamos.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us today. Today we are marking an international day which shouldn't actually exist. There should be no such thing as child soldiers. Despite that, many international organisations have reported on the way in which children continue to be recruited to armies. Our chairman told us already that there are estimated to be 250,000 children acting as child soldiers. They are threatened, extorted, kidnapped, used not just as soldiers but as guards, messengers, cooks. They're often subject to sexual violence, deprived of both safety and their childhood, and of course of their future. The Convention on the Rights of the Child has been ratified by many countries, but is most certainly not universally applied. This is why it's so important that work on conventions over and beyond international humanitarian law must continue. And the European Union must exert pressure on third countries which haven't signed up to the convention. Recently, Cyprus entered into a commitment regarding this. But a lot more needs to be done. It's important to underline the fragile nature of institutions and extreme poverty. Factors such as this continue to feed in to the ongoing recruitment of child soldiers. So, I would like to move on to my questions now, referring specifically to that matter. The fact is, we do, of course, need practical, concrete penalties, measures to punish those involved. Those responsible for recruiting child soldiers must be held to account. We've also suggested efforts to tackle the question of funding. It's very important, of course, to ensure that child soldiers be reintegrated into society afterwards, and that requires UN support. I would like to refer to one specific matter. As Ms. Vanessa Fraser said in her intervention, clearly we do need regular scrutiny of which rules are being applied and which aren't. The United Nations has underlined that the European Union's focus must be on effective implementation, and the reports underline that a great deal remains to be done when it comes to financial instruments and continued support for reinsertion and reintegration. So what exactly has the European Union been doing? Do we have a list of priority countries? What are the main risks in terms of violations? What work has been done with embassies? What practical measures are being taken right now to ensure that this plague comes to an end? That is, children are often very resilient, and this is one of the few sources of hope in our fight. But the ability of children to recover doesn't solve the problem. We have to act quickly. And the time has come for us to take practical action.
Madame Hassan.
Ms. Hassan for the left.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'd like to thank all the guests for their presentations today. The last annual report from the Secretary-General of the UN on the fate of children in armed conflict says that we have seen a 21% increase in violations against children in armed conflict. And we see that the highest figures are for different reasons in different contexts. For example, in Israel, the occupied Palestinian territories, but also in DRC. This has been raised by the different speakers, but many people haven't referred to Israel, and the figures are quite alarming. It's about 700 Palestinian children every year who are arbitrarily detained in Israeli prisons, according to Save the Children. And this is backed up by Amnesty International documents. From the age of 12 years, they can appear before a military court. They are detained for 121 days on average in Israeli prisons, and that comes from the United Nations. So I don't want to go through all of the different legal bases and conventions. All of us, including the NGOs in particular, have referred to those, and organisations that may be heard by the committee. But I'd like to ask a question to the EEAS about Israel's impunity. We have tried to sound the alarm several times. We have tried to raise the issue of Israel's impunity. It's an exception
With Shopify, I could turn my passion for coffee into a business. And to be honest, when I first started Chamberlain Coffee, I had a lot of anxiety about not being a business person. But what can be really helpful is to have tools. And Shopify was an incredible tool for Chamberlain Coffee. It just made making a website doable for somebody like me who's never done it before. And trust me, if I can do it, so can you. Start your business today with a free trial at shopify.com.
Strict respect of human rights, particularly of children, a dialogue that is with Israel. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Hassan. Mrs. Gomez-Lopez has the floor.
Spanish. Bueno, en primer lugar,
well, first of all, I'd like to thank the three speakers for their magnificent presentations. And I'd like to start with a question. It seems a very simple one, but it's actually very complex. The High Representative has said how, over the last few years, there's been an increase in the number of cases, of direct and indirect victims. And I've read that there could be up to 25%, that's up to 41,000 children who have been recruited, 23,000 who may have been the victim of torture and physical abuse. The reality is that in this report there is a significant increase. And so that's why the question I'm going to ask is complex, not simple. What is happening here? Why is the situation so bad here? Bearing in mind that armed conflicts are increasing in number and in degree of violence. So why are we failing? What could be done better? Not only the international community, but specifically the European Union. And here I'd like to ask some more specific questions. The High Representative talked in the report about the fact that there had been cases of child soldiers in Colombia recently, and Colombia has signed the convention. So what could be done about that? I'd also like to ask the representative of the Union about two things. First, you talked about specific tools. Could you say a bit more about the specific tools that are available to us, or whether we could participate in a programme to support child when they're being reintegrated in society? This was referred to by other speakers. Reintegrated then into society after being in armed conflict. And then we heard from the representative of War Child. We're talking about the multi-annual financial framework. I'm participating in the work on that, and to understand more about what we could do to include measures in the multi-annual financial framework. Do you have any comments on that? I was interested to hear what you said about the fact that there are children who are victims of recruitment and are being treated as terrorists. And then the High Representative also referred to something which struck me. I wonder whether there are some legal arguments about that. You mentioned something very important about the revision of crimes against humanity, and whether recruitment of child soldiers is a specific crime. Could you say that, please? Thank you. Thank you. I've got two questions. This first is for Mr. Shazamani. You gave us a very positive description of the EU's role here, and that's a good thing. But which other organisations are working on this issue? And Mrs. Fraser, you talked about collaboration between the UN, the EU and the African Union. Are there African Union states that are working on this in particular? And if so, which states are working on these issues? I'd like to give the floor to our panellists to reply. So let me give the floor first to Mrs. Fraser. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. You have all raised very interesting things and issues I would really like to discuss with you. There is a really important role that the European Union can play in order to help us stem the violence against children, and especially these violations that we report on. First of all, there are countries where the European Union has, provides funding to structural funds. I think it would be very important that there is a human rights traffic light system, perhaps, that countries do collaborate in order to stem the violations against children. Will have more incentives by the European Union. I'm not, development is very important, so I'm not saying that you should stop development funds, but I think that there should be a bit of a reward system and an acknowledgement of it. And in the discussions, even the European Parliament, in the various committees, whether it's economic or whether it's the Foreign Affairs Committee, but the Human Rights Committee, of course, but also the High Representative, when representing the European Union in some of the meetings with these countries, we should have key advocacy points. We have a specific number of countries which are on our list. We have 23 countries and one regional situation, which is the Lake Chad Basin region, which is on our report, where we give very important information about the trends that are ongoing there. And I think it is important that there's a common advocacy here, that there are common statements which are made in order to show these countries that it's not just the United Nations that is saying something about them, but the EU also takes note of what that country is doing on this particular issue, and that the EU supports child protection in that country and supports the country acting on child protection. There are different issues when it comes to the situations of countries. We really need to look at each situation on our report differently, because in some situations you have state actors, so the national forces. So if it is a national army, for example, that is recruiting children or abusing children, then clearly we need to work directly with the government to ensure that they are held accountable and to ensure that the government passes all the national legislation that is required to make sure that there is, accountability for whoever is violating this. But when there are non-state actors, we have to partner with the countries also in order to work with the armed groups to ensure that we can enter into action plans, for example, with armed groups for the handing over of children. We do this. One of the members mentioned Colombia. For example, Colombia has a mediation process for their peace which is being carried out in Qatar. We were given as an office access to the parties within that mediation process. We have started to discussions directly with one of the armed groups in order to get her into an action plan with them, which could lead to us and our partners separating a few hundred children from this armed group and reintegrating them into society. Colombia, it's true, is a member of the convention, but it is not Colombia that is violating the Convention on the Rights of the Child. It is the armed groups. And so we have to partner to support Colombia in order to combat these armed groups for their violations. There are a number. I have been, for example, to Syria, and this is the type of discussion.
Shops in Uganda always on break, but Gigi never sleeps. I shop anytime.
Why stress offline? Buy, sell, use. Gigi.
Which was listed for recruitment and use. However, we had very important discussions with the new Syrian government and with the defense forces, where we ensured, and we have commitments from them, and they have implemented already laws and a code of ethics within the army that recruitment will only be above the age of 18. Now that the armed groups, as part of their transitional process now and transitional justice, the Syrian government is absorbing the armed groups into one new national force. They have undertaken that there will not be recruitment under the age of 18, and that any of the forces that are being amalgamated into the new Syrian force, there would be age vetting, and if there are already children within these armed groups, they will not be absorbed in this absorption process. This is really very important, because when we enter into this action plan and this prevention plan with the new Syrian army, in order to put into paper these commitments, which will be time-bound, and the UN in country will have the opportunity to verify that they have that the new Syrian government have kept their word and they have implemented their commitments with us, then it would mean that we have protected several hundred children in Syria. We have protected them. These old violations continuing. And this is the way we need to work with countries. So we need to get the data that we have on our report, and we need to analyze it situation by situation and find the solutions that we need, which are specific to that situation. And we can work together on this, because the EU also is a very important partner with us. The African Union is very active on this. I had important meetings with the African Union at the end, in December of last year, and they had committed to me, and they have fulfilled that commitment, that they will appoint my counterpart. So now they also have a special representative on children and armed conflict, and we will work together on joint initiatives, which I will also propose to the European Commission, where we could do joint advocacy, but also field trips together, solutions for specific countries. If my office enters into action plans with violators, how can the other two organizations also assist us in ensuring that we support that country for the implementation of the commitments of that action plan? Thank you.
Merci, Madame Frazier. Monsieur Mathieu.
Thank you, Mrs. Fraser. Mr. Matthews.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the questions from the honourable members. So I should explain the mechanism by which we work on children and armed conflict. So what our guidelines conceive of and how it's implemented through the guidance note to our delegations is that delegations in the priority countries have a contact point, and that contact point is responsible for helping to integrate all the means that we have at our disposal. Those can be at the political level, so I could take the example of recent visits to Ethiopia by the EAS political director. They can be at the level of humanitarian assistance, because usually we're very active on that front in places where there is a conflict. They can also be at the higher diplomatic level, and I would refer there to meetings in the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference on Sudan that the High Representative held. So those priority countries are about 24 in number. They follow very closely the evidence that's given to the Security Council in the annual reporting by the SRSG, and they cover many of the countries that we've already referred to in this conversation, including Democratic Republic of Congo, Sudan, Ukraine, and indeed Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. There's a very important role for the UN that we can't replace, as Mrs. Fraser said, because they have a neutrality that allows them to talk to and get action commitments not only from the armed forces of governments, but also from armed groups, so in other words, non-governmental parties to conflict. And we're also very involved in trying to build the framework and protect the framework for international accountability, first of all through support for the ICC that was already mentioned, but also in terms of calling out perpetrators of violations against children through the global human rights sanctions regime and the territorial sanctions regimes of the EU. So our aim is to combine all of those things together. If I take an example like Sudan, a significant share of the EU's funding, which is in the level of many hundreds of millions of euro, is going directly to protecting children, maintaining continuity of education, helping to safeguard children from violence, exploitation and recruitment, and to support family tracing and reunification for unaccompanied minors. Just to say at the end, one of the honourable members raised an extremely big question, which is related to accountability in the case of Israel and Gaza, and there I think I would simply refer to you to what the High Representative has said in public on seeking accountability for violations of the laws of war, the Geneva Conventions, and on the Convention on Crimes Against Humanity, which is upcoming in the UN through a long intergovernmental process in New York. The EU is in fact one of the main proponents of a convention in that area. Thank you very much.
Merci, Monsieur Matthews. Monsieur
Thank you very much, Mr. Matthews. Mr. Shazamani, you have the floor.
You asked which other countries are also supporting this work. The list, unfortunately, is not that big. I mean, Canada, Japan, some countries in MENA have said that they are interested. And, of course, the European Union at this point is the biggest actor. And we cannot hide away from the elephant in the room, which is with the United States approach to ending aid. This actually puts the emphasis and the importance of the work of the European Union and the Parliament, and the emphasis on rights-based approaches. You asked, I think the representative asked about what is the European Union or the Parliament doing wrong because numbers are getting worse. I think the situation where we cannot actually put pressure on governments because they turn around, and we've even had this tell us, well, look at what is happening and what are the crimes that you are supporting yourselves, and the anti-rights movements that are taking place also in many of our countries. Then it becomes a much more challenging approach to have really conversations which puts rights-based at the center, and you keep pushing for this. And you asked which other countries are supporting. I have to also give credit to the countries. For example, I know the situation in Colombia. In the upcoming annual planning, I don't think there's time here, but I'm happy to take your contact information and come back with very clear recommendations on that, and also the situation of children that are being treated as terrorists rather than as victims. Espero que esté bien porque podemos cambiar esta información después. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Shazawami. Thank you for your reply, although you expressed some concerns as well. And that brings us to the conclusion of our debate. But to do that, I'd...
You got Glovo. You got it all. You got Glovo. You got it all.
Order Glovo and receive it in minutes.
Over to you.
Well noted. Yes, indeed, as we're all very much aware, the global humanitarian system is under unprecedented strain. The current funding crisis threatens to dismantle core components of child protection systems, including data and evidence gathering, frontline services, skilled personnel, preventive programming, and coordination structure. And this is unfolding at a time when the number and severity of humanitarian crisis, and particularly armed conflict, as mentioned by previous speakers, are escalating. Children face heightened risk of 6 grave violations, abuse, exploitation, and neglect. And in this challenging context, the Commission reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the agenda of children. Commissioner Labib continues investing politically and financially in ensuring the compliance with the international humanitarian law and prioritization of children's protection, well-being and empowerment, and she is also a strong advocate of children's right to safe and quality learning in conflict settings. The Commission's key focus on child protection and the firm budgetary commitment of the 10% of its yearly funding to education in emergencies makes it a reference donor with continuously strong child programming. Last year, we dedicated nearly 180 million euros for education in emergencies and child protection activities. This support included interventions such as case management services for children associated with armed groups and armed forces and survivors of grave violations, for instance, in Sudan. I believe that Alice mentioned it. Referral pathways and restoring family links in Ukraine, integrated education, child protection and psychosocial programs for conflict-affected children. I would mention, for instance, Northwest Syria, including with War Child Netherlands, actually, I believe. Community-based protecting measures, that was in Myanmar. Relocation of children at risk of recruitment into armed groups to safer areas. We mentioned Colombia. This is one of the cases where we do support these kind of actions. And then, of course, advocacy everywhere to address grave children's rights violations. The Commission also offers direct funding support to the Children and Armed Conflict Monitoring and Reporting Mechanism in Yemen, Lebanon, Myanmar and Bangladesh. And via what we call our Enhanced Response Capacity Program, we support Save the Children Netherlands with a project to strengthen humanitarian access for children. And the work explores access challenges and solutions for these children in Palestine, Myanmar, Yemen and Mali. So the evidence gathered so far show that a dedicated focus on children's interests, including their access to humanitarian services and protection, can actually offer powerful entry points for de-escalation and stabilization, because parties to conflict, even when deeply polarized, can show a degree of alignment around children's access to healthcare, nutrition, education and safety. And that is why children will remain an explicit focus of our work and will be a priority under the upcoming communication on humanitarian aid. I believe also Alice mentioned that one that will be adopted in May this year, and this is being co-drafted with the EAS. That this will also contain two main elements, this communication, one on a new strategic approach to humanitarian diplomacy, the approach to a fragile context. I thank you for your attention.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Ms. Villarosa. Protecting children from the scourge of war isn't just a legal obligation, it's a moral imperative, and it's the cornerstone of a world which respects fundamental human rights. We'll continue, for our part, to work with our partners in the other European institutions, with the United Nations, international organisations and civil society to prevent and eliminate this phenomenon and work to ensure that children the world over grow up in a world of peace. Thank you to our speakers. We're going to take a short break now, after which we'll resume with the next item on the agenda. 2 minutes break. Thank you.
It's okay for us. I wish you a nice meeting.
Thank you very much. I appreciate. Thank you very much.
I wish you a nice meeting.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome to this meeting. Let me inform you that this meeting. Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you for joining us here and online. Please be informed that this meeting is web streamed. We have interpretation in English, French, and German. The draft agenda has been sent to you. I don't see any remarks. The agenda is adopted. I also want to go over to point 2. The draft minutes for a meeting of 14th of January was sent to you beforehand. I don't see any comments. You can still send in comments till tomorrow morning, and then the draft minutes will be approved. Dear colleagues, I just finished the meeting of the Joint Bureau of the Africa European Parliamentary Assembly, and I'm happy to inform you that we will have begun preparations for the inaugural assembly, which will be held from 12 to 14 May in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. We will discuss this in more detail at our next meeting in Strasbourg in March. And then we now come to the political point of our agenda today, the exchange of view on the political situation in Uganda, specifically on the context of the 2026 elections and the post-electoral situation, in the presence of Mr. Robert Kyagulanyi, Bobi Wine, the leader of the National Unity Platform, main opposition party in Uganda. He is in remote connection. Then we have Dr. Sarah Birete, chairperson of the Global Network of Domestic Election Monitors and executive director of the Uganda Civic Organization Center for Constitutional Governance. She's also remotely connected. And then we have here with us Mr. Jonas Johnson, head of division EAS, Africa 5, Horn of Africa, East Africa. Dear colleague, distinguished guests, good afternoon. I'm pleased to welcome you again. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Today's session will be held on the political situation in Uganda. Like I said, I welcomed already our two guests. The exchange follows on the adoption of the European Parliament's resolution on 12 February on the post-electoral situation in Uganda and threats against opposition leader Bobi Wine. Let me first underline that Uganda is a very important partner for Europe in terms of regional peace and security. Uganda is a primary troop contributor to regional peacekeeping, particularly in Somalia, and it plays a key role in mediating conflicts in South Sudan and the DRC. Uganda is also a major refugee hosting nation, influencing regional stability by providing refuge and security to a large number of displaced persons. As partners, we want to work together to improve the situation of the Ugandan population. At the same time, we must be clear that our commitment to human rights and fundamental freedoms in the European Parliament is non-negotiable. We will not shy away from difficult conversation and will not contribute to the silencing of opposition. In the spirit of partnership, as illustrated by the Samoa Agreement, we wanted to have an opportunity to discuss these issues of concern with the government of Uganda. Unfortunately, the ambassador couldn't be here today with us, but we will sure make a new appointment so that we can also have an exchange of view with the ambassador. It is important to note that accountability is one of the central principles of democracy as it applies to the EU treaties. As part of its oversight role within the EU institutions and parliamentary diplomacy, the European Parliament regularly adopts resolutions on electoral processes worldwide, particularly when credible reports raise strong concerns. Resolutions are an essential means by which the European Parliament expresses its view on political processes, EU politics and global developments. The Parliament also uses resolutions to scrutinize other EU institutions, including the European Council, as part of its democratic oversight role within the European Union. In the resolution on Uganda, which is adopted on the 12th February, which was supported by an overwhelming majority of members, 514 votes in favor, 3 against, and 56 abstentions, We note serious concerns regarding the conduct and aftermath of the Ugandan general elections held on the 15th of January 2026, which has unfortunately failed to meet fundamental democratic standards. That opposition leaders and members such as Robert Kyagulanyi, it's easier to pronounce Bobi Wine, and human rights defenders such as Sarah Birete were particularly targeted in a very alarming manner, with arbitrary arrests, prolonged detention, and even disappearances. This is why we called in our resolution for the end of all violence, threats, harassment, arbitrary detention of opposition figures, activists, and critics, the dropping of all politically motivated charges, the lifting of arbitrary suspension of civil society groups, and the organization of comprehensive electoral and institutional reforms to ensure the independence of the Electoral Commission and judiciary. We also called for independent and impartial investigations into crimes against humanity committed by Ugandan political and military leaders, and into similar crimes committed by politicians and military in other African countries. We have here with us today NUP leader Mr. Bobi Wine, who himself has been a subject of institutional harassment and who said that his wife and children fled Uganda for fear of their lives following the January 15 presidential election. The European Parliament resolution also mentioned very serious concerns about how the opposition has been treated in the run-up, during and after the elections. We are eager to hear an update from your side. We would also welcome some concrete ideas on the way forward for Uganda. Dear sir, you have the floor. Good afternoon, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, friends. Greetings. I appreciate so much the opportunity. I want to appreciate the European Union Parliament for the resolution on Uganda and for keeping I'm still in hiding because of the continuing threats on my life since what happened on the 16th of January when my house was, my compound was raided and I fled my house. And also the following raid that happened on the 23rd of January where my wife was assaulted and my family members were assaulted, and the military took over my home, which the military still occupies to the present day. My home is surrounded and the military is in charge of it now. What happened on the 15th of January and the in specifics, victims like Mesa Chokero, who was shot and killed, and also General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who is the military chief and the son of General Museveni, came out on Twitter and, mentioned how he killed 22 of our people, and hoping that I would be the 23rd. I must mention, though, that the numbers that he put are much, much less. Maybe he mentioned or he meant those that he killed personally. Otherwise, the numbers that we have of the victims, of the people that have been killed, are much, much, much. The candidates were not given copies of declaration of result forms, and the Electoral Commission simply declared numbers that it did not justify where they were coming from. As we speak, we are still demanding that the Electoral Commission uploads the declaration forms so that the nation can be able to follow in transparency, so we can be able to compare the evidence that we have, the declaration of result forms that we have, to what was paraded by the Electoral Commission. But up to now, they have not uploaded the results on the internet like it's supposed to be. Somebody may ask, why then didn't we go to court? But we've mentioned it again, that institutions in Uganda have all been destroyed, including the judiciary. The manner of appointment of the chiefly is evidence to that. The Chief Justice was sworn in General Museveni's farm. So that and many other reasons cause us not to have, trust in the judiciary in Uganda. And many, many times the regime, General Museveni or his son, have actually been guiding publicly and sometimes privately, determining how the judiciary does its work. So we found no redress whatsoever in the Ugandan judiciary, and that's why we did not go to court. We have presented some asks, which I want to reiterate here. We've asked for targeted sanctions that target particular individuals and regime officials that have, excelled in gross human rights in undermining democracy, and to ensure that there's accountability for their crimes against humanity. Because I know we have other speakers on the platform, I want to appreciate you for the opportunity and to further call for more interest and for more attention to the people of Uganda. We really, really appreciate the attention, but we still request the international community to keep an eye on Uganda, to keep an eye on what is going on here in our country. I thank you for God and my country.
Thank you very much. I can promise we will do that. We will. I make sure, as the chair of the delegation EU Africa that we will keep an eye on Uganda and we will follow up the situation very closely. We have also here with us today prominent human rights lawyer and expert on constitutional governments, Dr. Sarah Birete, who was arrested a few days before the vote to give us her own account on the situation from the civil society perspective. You have the floor, Dr. Birete. Welcome in this meeting. We don't hear you. Maybe put the mic on the technical level. Try again.
Hello.
Yes, now we hear you.
Yes.
Hello.
Thank you so much, and I wish to add my voice to that of Honorable Robert Chagrani to thank you for the interest you're showing in the plight of Ugandans under a context of declining democracy. I want to start by re-echoing the values of the EU as enshrined under Article 2 of the European Union Treaty. And these are the values that we look up to: the values of human dignity, the values of freedom, democracy, equality, rule of law, and respect for human rights. The same values are enshrined in our constitution in Uganda, and they guide our work as a constitutional watchdog, the Center for Constitutional Governance, and a human rights defender, and the work that I do as a chairperson of the Global Network for Domestic Election Observers. On 30th December, I was not feeling well. I was in bed sleeping. I was awakened by the children that police had sieged our home. About 30 police and military officers had surrounded our home. 15 of these officers entered into the compound and were captured by the CCTV camera at my home. 5 of these officers entered up to my bedroom where I was sleeping under medication with two guns. As I woke up to take a shower in my bathroom, 2 armed officers kept guard on my open bathroom, violating my right to privacy, violating my dignity. I was incarcerated for 3 days at Mnatete police station under difficult conditions of restricted access to family and lawyers. My child, I was allowed my son and my niece to bring me meals, but they would be held for more than 3 hours before serving me a simple meal, yet I was undergoing heavy medication in incarceration. I was denied legal representation. My lawyers only met me a few hours on 1st of January, a few hours to interrogation. During interrogation, I had 4 lawyers present at the police station. I was denied legal representation. I was alone. And 1 lawyer was told to sit outside and he will be invited by the police if needed. Yet Article 23 of the Constitution provides that any person suspected of having committed a crime is entitled to legal representation, access to lawyers and doctors. I was chased away. I was held 2 days without knowing the offense I had committed, and when it clocked 44, that's when an officer came to interrogate me, asked questions regarding the president and his son, and the media interviews I do as part of my work. During arrest, all the phones that were in my home place of work, and they post offensive communication using deep fakes. The communication is related to what I was interrogated about. 2 of these accounts were opened when I was in detention in prison. And with my phone in the hands of police and with digital impersonation, I don't know what else they are doing regarding my personal data and communication. Towards elections, I was profiled as a highly dangerous person because of the work that I do as a chairperson of the GENDEM, chairperson of the Eastern Horn of Africa Election Observers Network, vice chairperson of the Africa Elections Observer Network, and president of the East Africa Civil Society Forum. The security thinks that this work that I do in the region, on the continent, and at the global level is dangerous, and it warrants me being treated as a terrorist because of promoting democracy and human rights. This profiling is what led to my detention and the charges that are related to a voter register, which I have never seen, that are related to sharing of data on a voter register, which is a public document, and these are the charges that I am battling in court. When you look at the work, the characterization of my work, during travels at the airport, some random security officers would ask me what I do and why I travel so much. And the work was characterized as recruiting for opposition, as fundraising for opposition.
You look like the kind of guy who buys flowers for his lady on Valentine's Day. Don't you think that's boring? Seriously, don't do that.
The unwritten offenses by the military and the security agencies in Uganda is that if you are a promoter of democracy and human rights, then you are a dangerous person to the government of Uganda. Our constitutional watchdog, the organization that I head locally, capitalizes on demanding for accountable leadership in line with the Uganda. But calling out to the regime to account on human rights violations on several media platforms is what rendered me to be branded as a criminal in Uganda. The siege under my home, which lasted for more than 2 hours, surrounding the whole neighborhood, took away, violated our privacy, led to assault of my children, led to the detention of their phones, and depriving them of a right to communicate or study, including those that were engaged in online studies. I will now embark on the plight of civil society organizations in Uganda. The suspension of work permits for organizations that work on governance, human rights, and elections violates the NGO Act of Uganda, violates the NGO Amendment Act of 2024, because the definition of the NGO Bureau in Section 16 means the board members of the Bureau. These board members do not exist after rationalization. The secretary who signed forms purporting to be holding out as the Bureau is impersonating the Bureau and has no such mandate. And the suspended NGOs were not given a right to be heard, which is a right provided for in the NGO Act. And the indefinite suspension of permits is in effect closure of NGOs without due process. The NGOs have been intimidated into silence because of a mention of activities prejudicial to national security. and most of them are hopeless and they cannot fight back. My third issue is on general human rights violations in Uganda. The militarization of the accreditation process for voter education and election observation leading to elections, which we refused, saying that voter education cannot be the business of the military. And because we were pushing back protecting the laws of Uganda, we were then marked as dangerous. In this election, there was no credible voter education, high militarization of elections, and disruption of opposition campaigns, especially those of the National Unity Platform, disrupted by the military and police, including roadblocks, the issues that we were talking about that led to the arrest, and
Ms. Barit, I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
Our chair, Hilde Woutmans, she had to leave, so I'm stepping in for her. My name is Ingeborg Telek, and I'm the vice chair of this committee. Can I ask you, please, to come to your conclusions, because I assumed this was your third and last item you wanted to address, or not?
Yes, please. I will mention the state of judiciary and rule of law as I go towards the conclusion.
Thank you.
We have the weak judiciary in place with questionable legitimacy, because the Bar Association of Uganda has been locked out of the Judicial Service Commission, and the ongoing appointments, including that of the Chief Justice and Principal Judge, have questionable legitimacy because of lack of quorum at the Judicial Service Commission. There is also abuse of the presumption of innocence by the courts of Uganda, and anybody suspected of committing a crime is treated as if they have already been convicted, and this is a violation of Article 28 of the Constitution. As I conclude, I want to re-echo the diplomatic relations between the EU member states and citizens of Uganda. There is remarkable silence from your representatives in Uganda, and we understand the diplomatic relations to be relations between member states while promoting the pride and welfare of citizens. There is silence on violation of human rights in Uganda. There is silence on the re-echoing of EU values that are enshrined under Article 2 of the treaty. And through you, I want to request that the people of Uganda should not be pushed to lose confidence in your representatives in our capitals by neglecting the rule of law and rights of the people. I thank you so much.
Asante sana, Mrs. Biriti, and your message is very well heard on this side. It's very well heard by the Parliament, and thank you so much for your intervention. And I think you really paved the way for our next speaker to also say something about the diplomatic relationships we hold as Europe with Uganda. So I want to give the floor to Mr. Jonas Jonasson, head of the unit for the Horn of Africa and East Africa in the European External Action Service. Mr. Johnson is the European Parliament resolution specifically called on the EU to engage with Ugandan authorities regarding violations, close monitoring relevant trails, and to review cooperation with the Assistance for Uganda to ensure respect for EU principles, as Mrs. Bariti was saying, implementing targeted sanctions and prioritize support for civil society, human rights, and LGBTIQ plus defenders and journalists. Can you please inform us about what the EEAS has been doing so far, both in Brussels and in Kampala, and how do you see the way forward? Mrs. Jonasson, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair, honourable members of this Parliament and distinguished colleagues also in this discussion, like the previous speakers. It's a very important opportunity indeed to discuss the situation in Uganda and EU-Uganda relations. Indeed, I would like to say a few words about that on our assessment of the elections and indeed, Chair, as you said, on the way ahead. First of all, I just wanted to refer to our statement of the 23rd of January, where we commented and acknowledged the results of the elections, but also expressed our regrets, especially with regard to post-election violence and threats against the opposition. The chair already referred to the context of, indeed, EU-Uganda relations, where obviously there are many shared areas of common interest for cooperation with Uganda and with Ugandan people, which ranges from trade and investments, green transition, connectivity, climate resilience, sustainable forestry, etc. And in all of this, as you know, one of our flagship initiatives, the Global Gateway Strategy, is very prominent here. I will refrain from going into details, but also to say, as the chair already mentioned, that Uganda's role in the region for peace and security is very important. Somalia was mentioned. Uganda's role as a major refugee hosting nation is very important and contributing to regional stabilization. And of course, Uganda has a global voice, for example, chairing the non-aligned movement. And in all of this, we stress that Uganda, through our governance programs, also strengthens the democratic process and civil society. And we believe that our economic cooperation and in all these areas that I mentioned will also promote the interest of youth, notably. Having said that, the EU continues to support governance reforms, civil society and human rights initiatives, because sustainable development depends on accountable institutions, the rule of law and inclusive participation. And over many years, we have worked with Ugandan institutions and stakeholders to support democratic processes through election observation, governance programs, civic participation initiatives, and sustained political dialogue to contribute to an environmental competition remains peaceful, inclusive, and trusted by citizens, as we have heard, is a very major issue. On the recent elections, actually our observations, and I knew that there would have been a representative also of the AU-IGAD COMESA findings of the elections. They largely coincide and align, which acknowledge the largely peaceful conduct of voting while highlighting concerns related to the political playing field, arrests of opposition actors, and restrictions affecting access to information. And such observations underline the importance of continuous dialogue aimed at strengthening electoral credibility over time. And as I already said, we said publicly we regretted the post-electoral violence and threats, particularly against opposition leader Robert Kyagulanyi, Bobi Wine, and we called on all parties to exercise restraint on the authorities to ensure the safety of all political actors. Looking ahead, electoral reforms remains an important area of engagement, and we continue to encourage progress on issues such as the independence of the Electoral Commission, transparency in results management, campaign finance, oversight, equitable media access, and effective dispute resolution mechanism, and anchoring all these reforms in Uganda's own constitutional jurisprudence. Through initiatives such as governance programs, the EU has supported civic education, dialogue platforms, rule of law initiatives, and capacity building efforts designed to strengthen institutions and encourage peaceful political participation as a long-term strategy to promote democracy and the rule of law. And for this reason, we remain our engagement with all actors, government institutions, opposition representatives, but also civil society, religious leaders, and security actors, because we want to support this inclusive dialogue. We will therefore also continue to engage as a predictable, principled, and long-term partner supporting Uganda's democratic journey through dialogue, cooperation, and shared commitment to stability and inclusive government. And that is particularly important as we actually celebrate this year the 50th anniversary of our relationship. And in that spirit, we would like to continue the support to the issues we have discussed today. But I want to stress that we are closely and we continue to closely monitoring the situation, as we've heard about today, the political and civic space, as well as the human rights situation in the country. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor to colleagues, to members. Would you please, do you have questions? Would you like to speak out or to intervene? Yes, please. Yes, please, Mr. Ujjan.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thanks for organizing this today's hearing. And I would like first to say on a personal note to Robert, all the best for you and for your family as well. We had the opportunity to discuss with David Lewis a couple of days ago about the situation during the election. And indeed, this looks more like a military operation, as you say, than to a real election. And for me, it's quite obvious that Uganda is can be at the same time this country that is brings stability to the region by engaging with neighbors and by hosting refugees from neighbors. And at the same time being horrible to its own opposition to people that engage in civil society. In a way, this country has kind of a split personality, being good on the one hand and mean to the inside, and that this state is a state as a booty for the Museveni family, and the regime can be seen today. Today there was planned to be held a Catholic Mass in the Lubaga Cathedral for political prisoner, Dr. Kisa Pasike, and other political prisoners that has been cancelled on the last minute by the Archbishop, probably because he got a call that it would be wise not to do this. For me, this shows that this is not a free country. And I can only say that for me, there's no transparency in those elections, and already acknowledging the results of such a fraudulent election is taking part in supporting a regime that is, from my point of view, not duly elected. So I think that we are already too positive on that note as a European Union. So it's said several times that the Ugandan constitution is very clear on the provisions, but apparently nobody cares, at least from those who are in the regime. So my question to our friends in Uganda is, what can we do further to support democracy and rule of law and human rights in Uganda, a part of doing what we do today, which is putting light to this situation. You request for targeted sanctions. My question to BAS is, what is hindering us if we know clearly that there are some people personally involved in abducting people, killing people, to put in place targeted sanction? These are my two questions to our esteemed guests. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there other colleagues who want to take the floor? Or not? Otherwise, Bobi Wine. Sorry for your family name is a little bit difficult for me to pronounce.
Yeah.
If you can give the floor first to you and then to Mrs. B. Rita. Yes.
Sure. May I request that you repeat the question again, please?
So, Robert, first I said all the best for you personally and for your family, but I wanted to know a part of putting light on the situation and organizing meetings like this and calling for targeted sanctions. What else can we do in order to support you on the ground that are
Uganda, but also association. I mean, it slaps those who believes in democracy and human rights in the face when they see ambassadors or diplomats from the world-known democracies standing shoulder to shoulder with gross human rights violations. For example, imagine just a minute you're going to see an official picture of an ambassador from a renowned democracy standing shoulder to shoulder. That is embracing, that is legitimizing impunity. And we call for a distancing on that. I mean, I've not seen an ambassador or an government official from a democracy standing shoulder to shoulder with look
Biriti, I don't see her. Are you still there? Yes.
Yes.
Sarah, can you say something?
Thank you so much. With the submissions of Honorable Chagrani on what you can do, I just want to re-emphasize 3 issues. One is that you should use more of the Global Magnitsky Act on individuals that are engaged in gross violations of human rights in Uganda. 2 is that you should put stringent measures to your funding agreements regarding the protection of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in Uganda that are at their lowest at this time, and we are worried about the next 5 years as citizens. 3 is that you should support more people as compared to government. Empower the people to fight for and protect their democracy. This is what you can do.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Biriti. And now, last, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Johnson. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about the sanctions, but also the conditions for aid.
Thank you very much. Well, it has been many references to the treaties of the European Union, and of course that is what's steering our engagement with all our partners globally. So it also in this case, of course, our development cooperation and our cooperation in general is not unconditional. It is based on our very clear values and expectations. In the case of Uganda, I've already outlined how we, at this stage, we monitor the situation very, very closely. We are engaging in a dialogue with both government, indeed, but also opposition and civil society. All of this, of course, is not happening in the public eye, but there is clearly a very proactive approach that we have, and also, of course, frank discussions. And through our development cooperation and the cooperation that we have, of course, we target that very much to governance and support civil society, as I've outlined. And we have the possibility of focusing additionally on that as we deem necessary, and to accompany a reform process. So the way we today, the approach that we have today is one of engagement, and the proposals of restrictive measures have not been
to emphasize and to stress that we as European Parliament are committed to support a peaceful and prosperous society in Uganda, and to do the work with all the relevant stakeholders to achieve this. So we will continue closely monitoring the situation in Uganda. And we do call on the Ugandan authorities to guarantee the possibility of a safe return, physical integrity and freedom of movement for Mr. Robert Kyagulanyi, Bobi Wine, as well as to ensure due process and an independent investigation into the arbitrary arrest and detention of Dr. Sarah Biriti. with this, dear colleagues, this brings us almost to the end of this meeting. If there are no more questions for the members, then I would like to close today's meeting. The next date of the next delegation meeting will be communicated. Yeah, in time. So hereby I close the meeting. So I'm very sorry. Good to see you. I'm sorry. So yeah, next time. Okay. Thank you so much.